Right, here we are today to talk about training for women, equal but not the same. So I have with me today my beautiful sister, Kirsty, who has about 15 years experience in the industry and is one of the most well-versed coaches that I have come across on, independent of the fact that she also shares a familial bond with me. And we have Monica Doonin, who is also a highly skilled coach, but also a nutritional medicine practitioner. I think I got that right. And so obviously both being women and both being women in the health sphere, I felt that they were much better versed than me to discuss this topic today. And basically, we are going to discuss it in a wide range of fields, not just training, because we want to unpack how women's physiology affects them, and really, to me, I want to bind back to femininity. I kind of feel that in our push for equality in the last 50 or 60 years, we've moved away from what is intrinsically feminine. And I really want us to understand the feminine, both as men and as obviously women looking to maximize your own health. So I'm going to hand it over to Kirsty first. And yeah, she's going to bring us up to speed with the different topics relating to female health and wellness.
Okay. So much like what you have just said, Duncan, like a menstrual cycle has an ebb and a flow to it. So it's a really beautiful place to start to realize that we can, and it's really important to enjoy that ebb and flow of the cycle. So let's break it down and connect a few of the dots that so we'll start with the beginning of the cycle. So that's when a girl would have just finished her bleed. So we've got about 5 days there where testosterone starts to go through the roof, and you'll start to feel like you're very independent. You don't need so many people around you, like you're quite creative in this sort of space. And in regards to training, this is when you can lift really heavy. So it's super cool if you can do your cycle of training where you can slot in heavy lifts here. You can sort of perhaps go for your PBs, you can trial a new lift if you want to, and you can actually kind of piece it together to have your deload while you have a bleed, and then you can start to lift heavy during this 5-day cycle. After that, you've then got about a 5 to 10 day window, depending on the length of your cycle, where testosterone will start to drop and estrogen doubles in your system. The difference you'll feel emotionally is that you'll start to want a little bit more connection with others. You'll perhaps want to have a few more hugs, a bit more lovings, a little bit more attention. And this is where you'll need to soften the cycle a little bit of your training. So weights need to come down a little bit. You can increase the density of training, which means you can sort of make the reps a little bit higher. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to go softer. You just have to sort of change the ebb and flow of the training. So weights a touch lower, not too much, and the numbers need to come up a little bit more. After you've gone past ovulation, everything sort of starts to settle a little bit more. Progesterone starts to come up. And this is where group training is really fantastic for women. It's where you want to enjoy giving as much as you're receiving. So group classes here are fantastic. And you can sort of lean into your own personal mood in this section. So if you want to lift a little bit heavier, you can if you're feeling good, and you can you have to tap in that section. So for me, in some months I feel fantastic, and other months I might have kicked myself out with other factors. So if stress is a component here, you may need to feel into that and ease back a little bit more. When you start your bleed, this is perhaps the only time ever for anybody that using machines is okay. So when the bleed happens, it actually pushes against the uterus and it shuts down your intrinsics. So while you're bleeding, to do PBs, to lift heavy, to do sprints, you're going to destabilize that pelvic girdle and open yourself up to an array of injuries, which is going to leave you with the potential of not heading down a great path.
By intrinsics, do you mean intrinsic core muscles?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
So all the hip stabilizers, the lower back stabilizers, the pelvic girdle, your pelvic floor, all of these muscles really struggle to turn on. So doing balancing work during this time is not optimal. If you're somebody that doesn't really get that many symptoms around a cycle, which is quite abnormal these days, and just because it's not normal, like it's not common, doesn't mean that it's normal to actually have symptoms around the cycle. It's normal to have no symptoms around the cycle. That's probably a controversial thing to say, as we're taught quite differently. I'm sure, Monica, you'd agree with that. But it's actually normal to not have any symptoms. And if you are getting symptoms, that means that your body is trying to tell you something. So for me, if I do get symptoms, I know I've pushed myself out of balance. So I've perhaps been a little bit stressed, or my food hasn't been as good. And it's a real slap in the face that I need to clean it up for the following month.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, just to sort of go back over it. So women are creative forces. You are here to literally to create life. And so what Kirsty's talking about is honoring that process within the boundaries of what society wants us to be, which is this sort of cover model issue look. So whilst we're trying to train, you're going to go through different phases of your cycle, and we should then honor that by doing different phases of training, right? So that's the nuts and bolts of what you're saying, Kirsten. Am I right?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so Mon, along those lines, there's obviously then going to be undulations in how we might eat. So could maybe you take us through the more nutritional side of what we would be looking at there as well, and add anything you might like to what Kirsty has just so beautifully explained to us.
Absolutely. So I think one thing to preface with all of this, when we're talking about a natural menstrual cycle, this is for women that are not on any kind of contraceptive. So when we're looking at a hormonal contraceptive, whether that's an oral contraceptive pill, the Depo-Provera, Mirena, or anything like that, we're not actually having a menstrual cycle. So you're not actually going to be having that ebb and flow. So you're going to obviously be getting this consistent intake of hormones. So there are two kind of conversations that we need to have, but I guess in the sense of what we're talking about today is for those who are not on the contraceptive. And I strongly encourage over time, I guess it's case dependent for clients, to really consider why you're on the contraceptive. So we can actually come back and assess how we feel, because we're not going, like I said, we're not going to be able to feel these changes. And then by eating appropriately, if you are on that contraceptive, it's really not going to make much of a difference. And so when we're talking about a natural bleed, that is because of the ebb and flow of the hormones, but a contraceptive is very much a drug withdrawal bleed. So there's two schools that we really need to look at there firstly.
Yeah,
so
that's a huge conversation.
Big conversation. So unfortunately, we're looking at two different types of women there. You know,
totally.
A woman on a contraceptive pill is more masculating, unfortunately. You know, there is a higher there's higher rates of progesterones, and that's which there is going to be higher muscle building and everything. But yeah, so we're going to focus more obviously on that natural cycle today. So starting with day one,
it's worth us delving into it another time. Like, we'll put a pin in that, but it's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, so many of my clients will go, oh, but I bleed every month. I'm like, it's not a menstrual bleed, unfortunately. So Yes. So let's start from kind of day one. So kind of what Kirst was explaining. So day one, we're starting with that bleed. And what we want to think of nutritionally is we want to start replenishing essentially everything that we're losing. So when we're losing blood, we're losing things like iron and zinc in particular. So we really want to make sure that we're looking after things that are going to build that blood up. So organ meats, a lot of just animal proteins, but your dark leafy green vegetables are going to be really good at replenishing that. But then also nuts and seeds are going to be really high in those nutrients. What's really important during this particular time is you're going to actually be a lot more sensitive to insulin as well. So in that earlier phase, you may find that this is the kind of the time that you're actually going to be putting on a little bit more fat if you are somebody who does not kind of control the cravings and control those sugar levels. So you want to find that with that estrogen increase in that earlier phase, you want to look for foods that are going to make you feel good, but foods that are not going to be like your donuts and your chips and stuff. Because when you think about it, estrogen is actually very important for regulating our neurotransmitters, particularly focusing on serotonin and dopamine and noradrenaline. And so when we reach for those foods, we get those hormones and those serotonins and dopamines. So you really want to make sure that we're just reaching for your beautiful plant-based foods, so then we are stabilizing your blood sugar levels as well. And like what I said, unfortunately with oral contraceptive pill, this just flatlines. So it doesn't really kind of happen during this time.
Is there a difference between hot and cold foods at that time of the month?
They're energetically, absolutely. You want to think, so bloodletting is a very warmth, like there's lots of heat and warmth within the body, so replenishing with warmth in the body. So I definitely like to have a lot of my clients thinking about your turmerics, your curcumoids and cinnamons and stuff like that, because again, when we're thinking about what's actually going internally, we need to bring warmth and that flow and healing and nourishing. So absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, definitely. As what Kirst was saying, at this point as well, when kind of in that earlier phase of the cycle, this is when that intensity within your training is great. Obviously not within the first few days of the bleed, but as we lead up to it, this is when those testosterone levels are great. So we are very much more adapted to our carbohydrates. We can utilize them because as we get closer to that ovulation, we can utilize the carbohydrates and your body knows actually what to do with those. So kind of moving from there, when we actually do lead up to that ovulation. So when we think ovulation is your body is releasing an egg. So that mid-cycle around that 14 days where your body's like, yep, let's go, let's make a baby, whether you want it or not, your body is going to do that every single month. And so as the estrogen increases, your body temperature is going to increase. So we're actually getting about an extra 100 to 300 calories within our basal metabolic rate within this period. So yay! But this isn't a time though where you're like, whoa, I'm going to go eat another extra 300 calories. This is a time where it actually is going to be a great time for you to potentially capitalize on a little bit of that body fat loss, because your body's burning a little bit more, those testosterone levels are higher, but those extra energy levels are for you to be running around and going, who's my mate? Let's make something, let's get busy. So that's what we're looking at that point. What we want to just focus on, I know it's a little bit funny, but that's kind of
it's great. It's just
the basics of it. It's 2020, but our body is still way back then. So, but what we want to think about nutritionally is we want to be loading up on our fresh vegetables at this point. So we want to think antioxidants. We want to think really rich and really nourishing. We want to get starting a lot of fluid and a lot of hydration in at this point as well. And as we start to see the estrogen increase, we want to actually start focusing on our fibers as well. So this is going to be case dependent. So For women that are unfortunately estrogen dominant, so when we're looking at PCOS or like people with uterine fibroids or anything like that, we really need to make sure that fiber intake is high, because these are going to bind to the excess estrogens. And when we bind to that, we can then actually excrete it through our feces. So it's really important that we're making sure we're getting a daily movement as well. So, I mean, we had a bit of a funny chat when we first started about having a good poo, but it's so relevant to your menstrual cycle. So if you're already starting to feel a little bit constipated around this ovulatory phase, it's only going to kind of get worse later into your phase. So just focus on getting those plant fibers in and getting your seeds and your nuts in there. Good so far?
Great. Yeah.
Good.
Very good.
Following.
Good.
To circle back so far, just to as a sort of reminder. So for the bleed, we want nourishing, warm, comforting but not comfort food.
Correct.
And then we move through, like with the training, this is a good time for upregulation. If you're wanting to sort of lose a bit of body fat, this might be a great time to do it, leading into ovulation, where obviously you get a little bit. So this is the luteal phase, leading into ovulation, where we then get a bit of a boost in a metabolic rate. Again, this might be a great time to lose a bit of body fat if you are so desiring, and we're out there in the world enjoying life, and then we're looking to increase our fiber uptake during that time as well, particularly if you have PCOS or endometriosis, anything like that. Perfect. Okay, great. So sorry, carry on.
Cool. So we have just ovulated. Your body is just, your ovaries or ovary has just dropped an egg. And at this point, we're now going to see those fluctuations in those hormones, where progesterone is going to start to increase and your estradiol is going to slowly start going. This is that 14-day period, or for some women, it may be a little bit shorter, where your body is going, are we pregnant? Are we not? What's happening? Okay. So with ovulation is where everything starts to build. Okay, so whether that fertilization has happened or not, your body is going to prepare for it. So without ovulation, there's not going to be that corpus luteum. So that's that endometrial lining. As this is actually happening, your serotonin levels are going to start to drop, and your dopamine levels are going to start to drop. So this is where we become a little bit hungrier. We start to get a little bit of those sugar cravings, and we start to go, I'm not getting the serotonin and dopamine hit in my brain. So I'm going to start looking for sweets and looking for extra energy. So your blood sugar levels are going to be a little bit more unstable at this point. So that insulin sensitivity is going to go down. So if you are somebody who does have sugar cravings, be very apparent and just, I guess, acknowledge those thoughts. If you are not somebody who tracks your cycle on an app, really just honor, well, not necessarily honor, but just go, I'm craving sugar. Why? Oh, okay. It's because I've just ovulated. This is where I'm at in my cycle. So as I said, so body temperature slowly starting to increase, as your body needs to be able to start to build this corpus luteum. And what's actually happening as well as our progesterone levels increase is your digestion slows down. Okay, so as if you were to actually now at this point be pregnant, or there's been a fertilization, the progesterone levels are going to keep increasing through pregnancy. And the reason why your digestion slows down is because your body is going to do everything it can to capitalize on the nutrients that you're consuming, because it's not only having to feed you, but it's feeding the newborn baby that's going to be in the tummy. Not newborn yet, the baby that's going to be in the tummy. So like I was saying earlier, if you are somebody who is a little bit more on the constipated side, or you're perhaps not going to the bathroom on a daily basis, as your digestion slows down at this point, it is even more important to start loading up and focusing in on those fibers, and making sure that we're also looking at a lot of hydration as well. This is where seed cycling may come in, and this is probably a conversation for another day. But seed cycling is where you kind of will go through sesame seeds, we've got chia seeds, we've got pepitas, where you cycle through, because each of those, like, again, will help bind to those estrogens and the excess hormones within the body, and just allow that to start moving through. And a real quick key.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic for women that sort of have really heavy symptoms around their cycles too. As Mon was just saying, it sort of helps the body ease its way to a more balanced hormonal system.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and not only with that, like, yeah.
Child's running around.
Children running around.
Yeah.
They're all down at the end of the house, but Han must have left the water filter on, and I could just hear this water in the background. And I was like, "What is it?" That's because it's leaking off of the side and flooding the kitchen. Right. Sorry. I'm back.
That's okay. So we're still obviously within this luteal phase. So again, so seed cycling, so making sure that we're looking after the fiber intake, but this is a really good time to start also looking after your liver, because again, the liver is a point of detoxification. So estrogens and those excess hormones, one way of detoxifying is obviously through the digestive function, through the stools, but the liver needs to process that. So this is where liver-loving nutrients are going to come in play. Particular groups of vegetables, they're called cruciferous vegetables, like your Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, artichoke, anything that kind of looks like a bit of a flower. These are really important. They've got a compound in them called indole-3 carbinol, which just helps regulate those estrogens. So really important at this point. And then again, this is going to be case dependent. If you are somebody who experiences a lot of PMS leading up to your bleed, focusing on things like B1, B6, magnesium and zinc are going to be really crucial at this point, because they help regulate pain as well. So again, like I said, case dependent. You can get it from your foods, but this is where supplementation is actually really effective. Magnesium is just king. Like I have it every single night. I love my magnesium. A therapeutic dose is around 300 milligrams. And what I'll say for women who do have more of a PMSy picture is you can actually increase that intake leading up to your bleed. So then it reduces those symptoms, and then day 1 and 2 you can still have a bit of an extra load with the magnesium. Looking for a magnesium glycinate is probably the best option, because it's the best tolerated within the bowels for a lot of people, and it being paired with the glycinate, glycine in itself is actually really calming and beautiful on the nervous system, and it will help promote sleep. So for those that probably get a little bit uneasy leading up to their cycle, looking at that. But of course, if we don't have supplements, magnesium is found in pepitas, in cacao nibs, in your dark leafy green vegetables, and then also your B1, B6, a lot of your meats and your liver and your organ meats as well. So yeah, there's a lot there. But
there is a lot there. That's why I'm sort of circling back around each time once we finish a point, just to sort of point it out for us a little bit. This might be a good time for us to share the diagram that we had. So we've got, this is our sort of 4 different phases. I've had it explained to me and I really liked it. It's the different phases of the different seasons.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys like that one as well, but menstruation or bleed being winter, luteal leading up into your bleed being autumn, and then follicular into ovulation being spring into summer. And I found that, as a dumb man, a really easy way to remember what each one of those sort of meant for the woman. And I'll circle back to that later as to why it is that men should be watching all of this as well. But yeah, I just thought this was a really nice diagram that Mon found, that shows you the different hormonal fluctuations.
A really great example, actually, to layer what you've just said, Duncan, as you know, a lot of the common words that we hear around women and their cycle, you know, can be needy, crazy, psycho, quite demeaning terminology around this. And you can see here what a woman every 21 to 34 days, depending on their cycle, what hormones are actually happening inside them. And so Monica touched on having an app. Whether you have an app, I cannot recommend this highly enough. If you are not somebody who tracks it in their diary or jots it down somewhere else, the app literally sends you a text message. Like, you will be ovulating, expect ovulation, expect your bleed, check your breasts. Like, it actually reminds you, hey, by the way, you're a woman and this is happening to you every single month. And so it shows you the absolute, like, it's a tornado that's going on.
It's such an important point that you make about, and this is, it goes back to what we were saying at the start around honoring your womanhood. Equal, absolutely, but not the same. Not the same, and shouldn't try to be the same.
No, I think it's the best gift I've ever given myself, is to really learn and honor my cycle. Not only can I then bring myself back into balance quicker, but that I'm then able to articulate where I am to others much more efficiently and effectively.
And you're right. The way that society talks about or doesn't talk about a woman's cycle is disgraceful, and coming from a man, it's really it's the anti-feminist movement. It really is. I'm not saying it's being pervaded by feminism, but it's to the detriment of every woman in the world to not understand and to not honor their abilities. And they are superpowers coming from someone who's just watched a woman give birth. It is awe-inspiring to be privileged enough to be along for the ride on that phenomenal journey. It can only be empowering for you as a woman sat watching this at home to understand every little component of it. And for men, it's one of the most important things that you can do for your relationship, is to understand it and not talk about it. If you're bringing a daughter into the world, or if you have a sister or a partner or a mother, to be able to fully understand them and the complexities that they go through and not diminish them, and talk about them degradingly. I think, as
a really fun fact actually is, so there's girls finished her bleed, 5 days, testosterone goes up, heavy lifting, lots of nourishing foods in there. Then for that 5-10 day period after that, where the girl is heading into ovulation, she's feeling a little bit more like connection. As a guy or a friend or a parent or a sibling, whatever, those are the 5 to 10 days where something will fall on a girl with much more readiness and esteem than any other time of the month. So if you want to get your friend a gift, if you want to bring home some flowers, if you want to take a date night, or just do something for the girl where they don't have to give you anything back, it will fall better in these 5 to 10 days than any other time. So as a guy, it's actually, I would say, recommended for you guys to have the app too.
Yes.
Because then you can be like, okay, where's this girl at? Like, what's she doing? And you'd be like, I want to take her on a date. I could do it this week. I could do it next week. Check the app. Boom, there you go. And suddenly it's symbiosis in motion.
Yeah, great.
And then you're not so disheartened when we're like, sorry, we're not going to be able to do it.
I'm in my independent phase.
And the guys all like puffy and puffy. Because it's like,
you've asked me to buy you flowers for a month. What the hell? Yeah.
Yeah, that could build out. Symbiosis in modernity. Okay, so we're going to just touch quickly now on. It's actually Kirsty has wrapped a whole business around this and created an online shopping website called Javita, which I highly recommend. But there's obviously environmental triggers that we have in modern worlds, and this is probably a whole seminar or webinar in itself as well, but we're just going to touch on how it might affect women from week to week, month to month, and how that can impact detrimentally or positively the cycle.
Yeah, so there's many different ways that our hormones can be controlled or chucked out or into balance. We've touched on 2 of those. So there's movement, mine went into the food, and it's basically anything that you can put in yourself, which includes any chemicals, moisturizers, shampoos, anything that basically goes on or in and around your skin. So like washing detergents, all stuff like that. If you're using something that is synthetically based, your body now has to filter that out. So if you imagine yourself like a water filter or even a coffee strainer or something, if you're piling something in, the body only wants to accept things that it recognizes. So if there's anything amongst that it doesn't, it now has to use all of its detoxification organs and energy that you could potentially be utilizing for something else to process these toxins. So a fantastic way to reduce all of this and to bring about into balance your hormones is just to stop using chemicals. Anything that goes on the skin takes 26 seconds to be absorbed into your blood. So around the menstrual cycle, an obvious one is tampons, pads, anything that you're putting in and around that area. Unfortunately, 90% of cotton is sprayed with glyphosate, and glyphosate is a really hectic chemical that can cause so much damage. Just switch over your tampons or whatever you use to something organic. We are so lucky that there are like a plethora of brands these days where you can just flip the packet over, check what's in there. There should be 100% organic cotton. That is it. So no binders, no chemicals, no nothing.
No bleach.
Go ahead, Monica.
Oh, no bleach.
Yeah, I mean, there's dioxide, there's bleach, like glyphosate. There's so many nasties. I could go on and go into each of them, but let's, keep it really broad.
The world that we live in.
Huh?
The world that we live in.
Totally. There's menstrual cups as well, which I have to say, originally I was like, I think it's a bit of a stretch for me. I'm not sure about these cup things. Anyway, gave it a crack, loved it. Can't imagine my life without them now.
Can you explain what they are for anybody that might not?
Yeah, so it's literally a cup, a silicone cup that you fold up, put inside you. It collects the bleed. When you're ready, you can then exit and chuck it out, wash it, and then you can reuse it. The benefits of these cups are they do hold quite a bit. So anyone with a heavy bleed, they're fantastic. They sort of take a little bit of a getting used to, but I now can't imagine my life without it. The other ones we've even got, it's just fantastic if you have young girls, or if you don't really love putting anything up there at all, is there's these pants that you can actually just pop on, and then you take them off, pop them in cold water, and then you can just wash them as usual. So really, really efficient, lots and lots of options. And we just having to consider that when you put anything up inside you, the layer of skin up there is so thin. It's such a quick barrier into your bloodstream that this is super, super important. Yeah. Another option is also condoms. So on condoms, they actually have casein, which is a component of dairy. So if you are intolerant to dairy, then if you use normal chemical-laden condoms, you're actually going to inflame your uterine wall to a huge degree. So there are now natural chemical-free condoms with no casein, amongst all the other smorgasbord of disgusting toxins.
Great. Awesome. And they can, so environmental chemicals trigger your hormones and get into your bloodstream, negatively affecting your performance levels because your body has to detoxify those before it will then allow you to go exercise, lose weight, blah, blah, blah.
Totally.
Cool.
I like to consider myself a little bit like a battery. And every time I do something or digest something or move in a way that isn't right for me, it sort of knocks the battery life down a little bit.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always felt like eating organic food and having toxin-free chemicals in my life allows me to be able to keep my battery as high as possible. And then it's up to me to deplete it doing the crazy stuff that I choose to do. Yeah, so it's kind of a really nice way that you can actually utilize and harness your genuine potential.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. All right. So,
just quickly add on that. So when you're talking about anything where we're placing it internally, we haven't really touched anything about the microbiome, but we talk a lot about around the gut microbiome, but there's also a microbiome within itself, within the whole vaginal lining as well. So tampons, pads, or the cups or anything, or condoms or anything like that, it has the ability to interrupt that microbiome there. So that's again why we want to be really focusing on things that are as close to natural as possible, because it is such a busy area in terms of that bacteria. So we want to look after that. When we are then linking it back to training, if there's any kind of disruption around that whole pelvic region, it goes back to, it doesn't then matter where you are within your cycle, there will be an instability within that region. You will not be able to fire up and be able to actually engage all of those core muscles because there's inflammation going on, whether that's within like the cervical lining or whether it's actually leading up quite higher into the body. So that's why we just want to go natural. And I mean, it's kind of, I know for myself personally, as I've gotten older, like it's actually about embracing the bleed and actually feeling the bleed as well, and kind of going, this is what it is about being a woman. Like you have to, it's really nice to actually be in tune. It's even better when you know you've ovulated as well. Like that's yeah, let's go. So yeah. Yeah.
I love the notion when I first started learning about my ebb and flow, that when, particularly with my movement, that if I started an exercise or wrote myself out a program or I was following something else, that when I started, if I started to feel like I was pushing shit uphill, I would just pull it back. And then if I started to feel, oh, I've totally underestimated this, I could go way heavier, I'm feeling fantastic, I'd then lean into the skid. And to not sort of be concerned or worried about changing your mind. Like it's okay if you do the first set and you're like, oh, I did not realize I was so tired. Just pull it back. You're supposed to feel at the end of a workout better than when you started. If you're leaving that workout completely depleted, you've now created a hormonal disbalance that your body is now going to have to heal from.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so common that women will just have a Panadol and then go continue their workout.
They'll be embarrassed that they're supposed to lift the same as they did last week. Yeah. You're not going to. No. You are never going to lift the same as you did last week. That's you understand that. You can kind of lean into it and know, well, it doesn't matter if I can enjoy that heavier, lighter, medium, heavier, lighter, medium. It's it's this really nice kind of routine. Yeah.
This is where good personal trainers need to understand that they can't train women the same way they train as men. Men are this, women are this. So
Paul Chek has a beautiful analogy for that. He calls men trucks. He says you can drive them into a wall continually and continually and continually, and they'll be absolutely fine. Women are like Porsches. You need to keep them undercover. You need to service them regularly. You need to check on them. And if you bash them around too much, they'll get broken.
Yeah.
I think that is a perfect way to wrap this up.
The girls are Porsches. Yes.
Keep talking. I'm so passionate about this, but yeah.
No, me too, which is why I wanted to do this. And thank you both for sharing your knowledge with us. I think in conclusion, start off with the title, Women Are Equal, but Not the Same. Right? We have those undulations through the cycle that you can match your training and your nutrition to, and you're going to fly through the roof in terms of your health and wellness. A woman will take roughly a third longer to lose the equivalent amount of body fat than a man. So you cannot physically line yourself up next to a man and strength train. or eat or lose weight the same. And that is, and I think that's one of the things that started me wanting to understand more about this, because I train so many women. It is just impossible to have the same paradigm for them, particularly if they're on, like Mon said, a natural cycle. So thanking you again. And we're going to end the recording now. If anybody has any questions that come out of this, then you can find Kirsty at either Javita, or is it just on Instagram, Kirsty McDade? Yeah. Monica is
Monica, I don't even know what my own Instagram is. I should probably. Yeah. Monica_Anna nutritionist. Yes. I'll just quickly add, if you. Yep. A great reference for learning about your cycle is Lara Brydon is the queen, and also Nicole Jarman. Awesome. So I don't know, I'll let you know what they are, but they have the best resources so you can actually learn about your cycle.
Great. All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.